This is AI Goes to College, a new podcast about artificial intelligence in higher education and beyond. Welcome back to AI Goes to College, where we explore the intersection of artificial intelligence and higher education. I'm your host, Professor Sarah Stuart, and today we have a very special guest joining us, renowned author, educator, and speaker, Flower Darby. Welcome, Flower. Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for being on the show. How are you?
I am so good, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. This is fascinating topics to talk about, and it's just my pleasure to be here.
And we're going to talk about social health and mental health when it comes to AI and education today. So I just want to give you a proper introduction. So Flower is an expert in how we can use technology to build more inclusive, engaging classroom. She's the Associate Director of the Teaching for Learning Center at the University of Missouri, co-author of The Norton Guide to Equity-Minded Teaching, and co-author of Small Teaching Online. Not least, Flower is a sought-after speaker on all things higher ed and teaching. And recently, I saw you at an educational conference in Orlando where you were definitely the most engaging and entertaining event in a very engaging conference. So you wrapped up the weekend, or I guess it was the week. It was in the middle of the work week, but it was so wonderful. And I'm just so glad that you're on the show. So what did I miss about your background that has to do with higher ed and technology?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for your kind words about my talk. I do enjoy these opportunities, and I'm always humbled when folks have, an interest in listening and what I have to say. So I don't know that you missed anything necessarily. I've been teaching in higher education for over 28 years and have taught in many modalities in the dance studio, in the group fitness exercise room, in small in-person classes, in fully online classes, large enrollment. I've had lots of opportunities to really explore ways that we can really foster student learning. Right now, the thing that I'm really focused on is how we can make online classes more enjoyable for everybody, faculty, students, because I believe that we will all thrive and flourish and be more successful. Our students will learn more effectively and will find our work more rewarding when we're really enjoying our experiences in online teaching and learning. So that's where I'm focused right now. And how AI intersects with all of that, of course.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I saw that, and when I was doing some research, how you have a background also in fitness classes and dance, and that's so wonderful. I also do dabble in fitness and Tai Chi and yoga, and I find that embodiment, like teaching in a very embodied way, is so different from what we do in the classroom in higher ed, and it would be wonderful to have some way of those worlds colliding. How they do in a lot of elementary school and middle schools, they teach mindfulness and meditation.
Yes.
So I'm curious about that. That's just, it's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that you have that as a background. Okay, so let's focus on artificial intelligence. I know that you've been teaching or you've been, speaking a lot about technology in education, but when it comes to artificial intelligence, things are changing all the time, right? So what sources or what books are you reading right now? What websites are you maybe going to kind of keep up? Who do you turn to at this, right now I'm reading a book by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote Sapiens, and I loved that book so much. And he just published a book called Nexus, which is kind of about the existential threat that we may face with artificial intelligence. But I'm curious to know, who are you reading?
Yeah, I have been struggling to keep up with the flood waters of, everything related to teaching and learning with AI, how AI is impacting our relationships with each other, our society more broadly. So I haven't gotten into very many books yet. I do really focus on webinars, blogs, podcasts, all of these kinds of things. Now, I will say I gained a lot from Jose Bowen and Eddie Watson's book, Teaching with AI. Probably some of your listeners have come across that book. But I'll tell you, one of my best sources of reliable, solid information is a webinar series hosted by a company called Alchemy. And I can provide that link to you if that would be helpful, because they have recordings and robust resources for everything. And I'm going to be very honest. I approach a vendor hosted event with a healthy degree of skepticism, but this
Yeah.
particular group, facilitated and led by Dr. Brett Christie, has been solid, really very helpful. So that's the resource that I think really stands out for me.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. Let's talk about kind of the broader issues here. Before we even talk about we've been doing a lot of tips and tricks on the show for educators, which is really good. We really need that because we kind of need to know, well, what do we do now? But I want to talk about a bigger conversation. Um, I wonder, do you think that we are kind of at the risk of losing our humanity when it comes to technology, when it comes to integrating it too much into our lives and integrating artificial intelligence too much into our lives? Kind of like, where are we going to lose that thread of humanity? And then of course, well, let's talk about that, and then I'll get to the second question.
100% yes. I believe that if we are not careful, if we are not critical, if we in higher education are not taking the lead and shaping conversations with policymakers, with industry leaders, with governmental agencies, I do believe that we are facing a significant threat. Now, I don't choose to stay there, as you know from the talk that you attended in Florida in the summer. But I do believe we have to be very aware and very on guard of what these tools can do and the threat that they pose.
Yeah. Do you think there's a way for us to do this? And we'll get into kind of the details of this, like when it comes to the classroom. Is there is there a balance that we need to strike when it comes to kind of keeping that social educational experience and using technology?
Well, yes, absolutely. Over the last several months, I've seen so much anguish, appropriate anguish, expressed by higher educators, faculty members who care deeply about their students. And they're so challenged by the prospect of robots grading robots in one essay that I saw, right? And we are right to be wrestling with this, but you actually hit the nail on the head when you said the importance of the social connections and that authentic and meaningful relational kind of teaching is 100% the way forward. I like the way Michelle Pacansky Brock talks about this.
Mhm.
She is in the California Community College system doing wonderful work, specifically with online classes, but her ideas really broadly apply. And she talks about the human advantage. We must fiercely protect our humanity and those human connections at that meaningful and authentic level, which, let's be honest, in higher education has not always been a priority. And
Yeah.
given the systems that we work in, it can be hard if we're teaching large enrollment classes or asynchronous online courses. It's hard to connect meaningfully with other people, but that is the way forward in this case.
Okay. So when it comes to like creating community, when it comes to feeling like we belong in a classroom, which is really kind of the essence of getting to, you know, finding that magic in education, right? The students feel like they belong. They're in this classroom. They're part of a group, even if it's just for 12 weeks or 16 weeks. Are there like any specific platforms? You don't necessarily need to name names, but are there tools that you're using that create more community and more of this social aspect than others?
So good question, and it depends, of course, on the format of the class. I'll choose to
Mhm.
talk about asynchronous online classes first because
Okay,
I believe that is the hardest place to
absolutely.
cultivate, right, to extend
Yeah.
belonging. But this actually is the focus of my current work, and it's a topic that we explored in depth in the 2023 book that I had the privilege of co-authoring, The Norton Guide
Wonderful.
to Equity-Minded Teaching. It's in there because it's all important. So
Mhm.
for me, Sarah, you asked about is there a tool that fosters this? Yes and no. Okay, so definitely, broadly speaking, in asynchronous classes specifically, I really love when we can incorporate video and
Mhm.
photos.
Mhm.
Even at a very informal level, I would say, especially at a very informal level, for faculty members to be willing to talk with their online students, even across time and space, for
Mhm.
faculty members to design ways for students to show more of who they are, whether it's photos on a Padlet board, as an example. Just ways of getting our faces and our voices, just like what would happen in a physical classroom.
Mhm.
That is a really great way to extend belonging and build meaningful community in online classes.
Okay, wonderful. So how do you see I know you've been an advocate for advancing equitable goals for the classroom.
Mhm.
How do you see AI fitting into this? Like specifically artificial intelligence, tools. How can that, make things more equitable?
Yeah, so this is a really nuanced topic, and I really think that everything we talk about with AI, it's important to preface our conversation with that healthy reminder of being cautious, of being skeptical.
Yeah.
I do believe this is the most complicated and nuanced topic that we have navigated in higher education in my almost 30 years. And I'm including the pandemic, which was a rough time.
Wow,
But
yeah.
that was hard, but I feel like we have more nuance here. So to answer
Mhm.
your question, while we keep a critical eye on the ethical concerns that we should keep on our radar, if here's where I would go with this. If we're not helping our students learn how to use AI in appropriate, thoughtful, and responsible ways, we are doing them a disservice. They will be on the back foot when it comes to the job market.
Yeah.
And more importantly, I believe that as we are navigating this time as a society, as educators, we have an opportunity to develop engaged citizens in our classes. We
Yeah.
all need to be developing greater literacy, greater fluency, greater awareness of how these tools are shaping and impacting our day-to-day experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I'm wondering if you have any specific examples, because I'm thinking of my current online asynchronous class, where I have really turned to videos to do
Yes.
those final projects, to do introductions, and sometimes I make an option, and sometimes I don't. And I do find that some students kind of fall away. They're like, "Well, I don't even want to record my voice. I don't, And so there's that. Can you share examples of like where technology has deepened connections, where it's been successful? Especially in those online classes.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought up that not every student is on board with recording as an example, and they have a right in that regard as well. So, from an equity minded approach, I do believe it's important to be proactive. Whatever the technology is that we're integrating into our classes, be proactive to offer opt out or other options in that regard. So, when it comes to recording video, of course, one way to support that student who is reluctant to show their face on camera, and again, perhaps rightfully
Mhm.
perhaps rightfully so. What we can do is we can invite them just to post a still photo of something that they like, right? Maybe it could even be a representative image and then record audio along with that. We do know that many people, I wouldn't say just students, but many faculty members as well, feel nervous on camera. It's not
Mhm.
an environment that we're comfortable on. So
Yeah.
I like to really focus on building that trusting community in an online space so that students know it's okay if they trip up over their words. I fully believe, again, the pandemic was sort of a case in point, but I believe that we would all do well to become more comfortable in video calls such as this one. And so helping students to develop a comfort level recording, because it really does increase their humanity. I'm thinking of a time when one of my online students was recording the quick video discussion post. At one point, I moved away from written discussions and students did all video discussions. And
Mhm.
then the tree behind her fell over because her cat jumped on it. And she just kept on going. She said, "Well, my cat knocked over my tree, but I'm just going to keep on going," because I had worked very intentionally to create an environment where she was like, "Well, that's all right. We're just going to keep on going." Right. So I
Yeah.
do believe that as educators, we can kind of create the environment that helps students reduce anxiety in
Yeah.
order to be able to connect in meaningful ways and in ways that can happen in person. We need to be a little bit more intentional online.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of when I first started allowing my cat to just walk across and kind of come up to during COVID, and I was
Yeah.
like, "You know what?" And always worrying before that, "Oh, I don't wanna come across as silly or unserious as a professor." And it was like, "Well, here we are," and it created this kind of new intimacy with students, and then they all introduced their pets, and that was a wonderful time.
And I feel like we want to hold on to some of those lessons, right?
Mhm.
And it does come with practice. I distinctly remember when I first started teaching online, my online videos that I instructed in were very stilted and professional. And
Yeah.
over time, I realized, and by the way, there's research that backs this up, that that more relaxed, informal approach is much more palatable to students. It's much more engaging. If you
Yeah.
think about it, when we teach in person, we are not talking like this and perfectly stiff and stilted.
Right. Yeah.
So being ourselves, really, that's the key here is we want to be ourselves. And if we have a cat walking in the picture, I remember a time when my 9-year-old was jumping up behind me because she thought
Mhm.
that was funny. And I was like, all right, do that. I don't care. I'm going to keep on teaching.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, let's talk about how. Because I think about when I was a new professor, I wanted to be so serious. I wanted to distinguish my, I was like a new graduate, and so I felt like I was trying to distinguish myself from being in college, and then I had these, freshmen, and I was trying to be serious, and I was trying to have a lot of rigor. And so I think we really focus on that when it comes to these artificial intelligence tools that we have, because we're like, well, how do we make sure that they're not cheating? But let's move away from that and move into specific, um, maybe techniques and tips for cultivating empathy and emotional presence, kind of like some of the things that you shared with us in your talk when, at the conference. In virtual classrooms for professors who are maybe or administrators, educators who are maybe not used to doing this, what are some specific things that we can do to really, beyond the content of the class, what can we do at the beginning? We always say establishing decorum is so important. How do we establish empathy and emotional presence?
yeah, I would 100% agree that those are key ingredients for a thriving learning community. And I also want to acknowledge, I'm not going to dwell on this, but I also want to acknowledge that we do need to account for our own identities in our teaching experiences. It sounds like you began teaching at a relatively young age. I was 22 years old when I taught my first English and dance classes at the same semester in my master's program. And I was, again, very mindful of trying to establish some authority
Right.
right in
Right.
when I was 4 years older than my students,
Hmm.
and that has relaxed over time. But I don't want to ignore the fact that we do need to pay attention to our age, our experience level, our status within the department. Not to mention more meaningful identity characteristics such as our race or our gender identity, or
Hmm.
right, lots of things. We don't want to ignore that.
Yeah, that's
However,
right.
and so everything that I say now, I want to sort of preface with a reminder to um, be mindful of what feels comfortable and safe for you. When I was 22 years old, it would not have felt comfortable to be as relaxed and informal as I am now. So that's key. That's first. And in the
That's
Norton Guide, we talk about that, the importance of prioritizing our well being. Now, to answer your question, really we've started to kind of circle around the idea that we have to be ourselves and let our students see that we're ourselves. And I personally believe that this is challenging in those asynchronous classes. But again, I'm going to refer to the wonderful work of Michelle Pacansky Brock and her work on humanizing online teaching. We have to bring our own humanity into these classes. We have to convey to our students that we respect them, we welcome them, we want them to be in our classes. We're here to support them. You mentioned a minute ago, beyond the content. I am my students' biggest cheerleader.
mhm.
Maybe other folks listening want to be their students' coach, their mentor. That's the opportunity that we have, and we can communicate that from wording in the syllabus, from welcome videos that we might choose to share even prior to the first day of class, from that warm tone that we infuse into all of our written and spoken communication in online classes. Anything that we can do to reduce the transactional distance in
Mhm.
these spaces can help students feel that there is a real person on the other side of the screen who cares about them.
Yeah. I think that's what we all want. We want that when we call our phone providers, our internet providers, our doctor's office. We just want to talk to a person.
That's
So,
a key point.
yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So we have some ideas about how to kind of like establish that empathy, that emotional presence at the beginning of class for all students. Let's talk about kind of individual students and the problem of mental health at this maybe at this particular stage. Obviously, mental health is a big thing for all of us. But do you see any tools or strategies that artificial intelligence can help us with at this point? So maybe for those who are more hesitant to take advantage of mental health support in traditional ways. Is this a way? I mean, this could also be an existential threat as well, but is this also a way, whether it's through chatbots or virtual assistants, for students to be more supported? Is there,
Yeah,
have you looked into that?
absolutely. I've been wrestling with this very topic as the mom of high school and college age daughters,
Mm-hmm.
all of whom are wrestling with the kinds of mental health challenges that we are seeing in the media, very broadly speaking.
Yeah.
So, if you recall, when we were together in Florida at the conference, I was talking about this period that we're in, and I was referring to this idea that really we're in a space of emotional soup. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a phrase that I came across in a wonderful book called The Spark of Learning by Sarah Rose Kavanaugh. And it's about this idea that we are managing and processing so many emotions. Now, when she wrote about it, she was talking about our traditional age college students and all the stresses and concerns and relationship woes that they're navigating. But I expanded this idea to include our own challenges that we're trying to figure out. How do we use these tools? Are they helping our students?
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that collectively in higher education, we're in this very emotionally soupy point. And you ask an important question: can these tools help in real time? One of
Mm-hmm.
my daughters struggles significantly with social anxiety, and I have wrestled with that too. Can a tool provide a little bit of guidance in this moment when she's asking me how to text her friends? Of course, everything that I come up with in terms of wording is right out the window. I'm
Right.
wondering, can these tools be a real time support? But it's very, very, again, very complicated, very nuanced. Just this week, I read a very heartbreaking story about a 14-year-old who chose to end his life so that he could be with his AI companion that he had created on Character AI.
Oh.
So poignant, heartbreaking. We must be careful. And literally, I knew this question was going to come up today. So I asked my 16-year-old,
Mhm.
what do you think about these things? And I love her insight. She said, for some people at some times, yes, maybe a therapeutic AI can help in that moment. Maybe the AI can say, hey, go outside the house and go on a hike or
Right.
go to the coffee shop, right? Maybe it can provide some real time support. But I think she and I both would add that there has to be, again, that element of human wisdom. That's really where I see our big sort of saving grace when it comes to these tools and how they're going to impact our lives. Is we
Mhm.
have to hold on to the importance of human wisdom, which
Yeah.
is gained through hard won experience. Maybe those tools can be helpful, but we certainly better not rely on them. I suspect that story that I was referring to is not going to be the only example
Yeah.
of these tools leading to really heartbreaking outcomes.
That's so sad.
Very.
Yeah. I have a high school student and a college student as well. So
Hmm.
my daughter also, she's dealt with anxiety, like
Yes.
severe anxiety. I don't think it's uncommon at all. So it's interesting how technology has created so many problems. It would be really nice if we could also have the solutions there. And I mean, obviously, it's all one and the same, right? It's like it's created so much connection and so much disconnection, and I have a feeling artificial intelligence is going to be no different.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. Um, the chat. I find it so fascinating. Just having virtual chatbots, and I signed up for something a colleague of mine shared, and it was talking to your older self. I don't know if you've seen this
Oh, I
project.
haven't come across that.
I think it's out of MIT. I might be wrong. Maybe I'll put this in the notes too. But you set up a profile of and it's mostly made for college age students. You set up a profile to talk to your 65, 70-year-old self.
Mhm.
And it's really neat because there has been some studies done about talking to that older self that has made it, that has done all of the things that you wanted to do, is really comforting to a younger person. So maybe that's one of them. But the research is ongoing.
Well, and I love, again, there's some really wonderful supportive things that are happening with this kind of innovation. And again, my main message is let's be careful that we don't get so sucked up about, into the excitement and, oh, look at this,
Yeah.
isn't this cool? We need
Yeah.
to maintain a wary eye on the downsides, the threats, the challenges. But I agree, there's some cool things that people are doing.
Yeah.
We're in a very interesting time.
Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity,
Yes.
and a lot of risk, uh, as it
Yes.
goes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about small teaching, and maybe you can kind of tell us what that means, and share how some small intentional changes in your teaching, and this can be AI or not, maybe just technology driven um, ideas that can bring warmth and human interaction to that social environment that we talked about that we need for education.
Yeah, love it. So, small teaching, I must give credit to James Lang, who coined the concept in his book called Small Teaching. And it's all about little changes that we make, but they are based on the learning science, what we know about how people learn. By the way, belonging and that emotional element, that social element, all play in because it impacts very directly how we can learn, think, and engage. But the small teaching approach, when we base it on what we know from the literature, it has an outsized impact on student learning and success.
Mhm.
And Jim's concept was born out of the idea that sometimes teaching innovation feels really overwhelming. Specifically, he was thinking about things like blended classes and flipped classes, all of which use technology. And he was rightfully sort of identifying the fact that the prospect of revamping an entire course to have a very different modality
Mhm.
was just very overwhelming. And so his thinking was that it actually stops people in their tracks. And what he proposed is there are little things that we can do that don't feel so daunting, don't create a lot of extra grading burden, not a lot of prep time, not a lot of time to take in class or handle in class. So I was very privileged to be able to write the Small Teaching Online companion book to How Do We Do These Things in Asynchronous Classes. And this concept has really resonated with me. As you know, one of my current talks and areas of focus is small teaching with AI, right? It
Yeah,
can feel very overwhelming to faculty. I know many of us haven't really dipped our toe into the teaching and learning with AI water yet. Small
yeah.
teaching is a way to move forward because it doesn't feel so scary. So
Wonderful.
yeah, I'll just share one very, very simple example. And I love this because it's almost like micro teaching.
Yeah.
And that is, did you know there is research to show that in online classes, using emojis warms up the tone of the class and helps to cultivate a trust filled environment? Um,
Wow.
Even something as simple as putting a smiley face after, a line in the announcement.
Yeah,
So now, again, I actually want to sort of remind us that we should only do that if that's authentic. I know my brother, for example, thinks emojis are stupid, and whenever I use them in my text with him, it kind of
yeah.
irritates him. So if you're not an emoji person, don't do that. But a lot
Okay.
of times I'll put a thumbs up and a smiley face in the assignment comments when it's something that doesn't require a lot of meaningful feedback, and that helps me to
Mhm,
move quickly through my grading while also helping my students to know that I'm a person, I'm on the other side, I've been
mhm.
looking at their work, I appreciate it. So I'm going to call that a micro teaching example.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Yeah. So emojis. I like emojis, sparingly. I like emojis. And
And there's research to show that too, that we can overdo it, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. Any other
Oh,
tips?
sure.
Yeah.
Just on that line, again, and I always think it's amusing when research backs up things like this. If you're a meme kind of a person, sending memes out on a weekly announcement, as an example, we know for sure that deliberate and strategic use of humor, no
Mhm.
matter the class modality, helps students engage and learn.
Yeah.
So I will share a small teaching with AI recommendation that I have been implementing myself in a class I'm teaching this fall.
Okay.
And that is that I created an assignment, it's a weekly assignment that I'm calling AI learning logs. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do think it's important to let students opt out. We have conscientious objectors, they have moral concerns, they are concerned about data privacy. So my students don't have to use AI, they can do the learning log without it. But
Mm,
I'm encouraging my students to go and play with any tool that they want to. The concept is that they take something from class that we discussed that week or that they learned, relate it to anything else in their life. What are they seeing in pop culture? What's gotten their attention on TikTok? What's happening in their other classes? What are they dealing with at work? Take a concept, relate it to something else in their life, and then have fun with AI, maybe creating a representative image or some song lyrics. my students have gotten really creative with that aspect, and they're processing what they're learning. They're applying it, which is so important for how we learn and retain new information. And there's a creative and fun element with AI as well.
Wonderful. I love those. I
Thank
wanted
you.
to share one that I do just because your
Yes.
talk inspired me and the idea of, doing little things really inspired me. And so from this week, we're learning about the hero's journey.
Yes.
And I wanted the students to write a reflection paper of their own hero's journey just by like choosing, one small um, challenge in their life that went through. So they're writing this reflective journey, but we're also um, learning about comma splices, right? And so what I had ChatGPT do is create a reflective journey for Ariel the mermaid, and
Yes.
as if she is a student in our classroom, and we called her Ariel Triton. She created a reflective paper. It was about 500 words, but it's filled with comma splices and capitalization errors too, just because I see a lot of that. And I think one more thing. And so we were able to, before they even turned their papers in, look at Ariel's paper and fix it for comma splices and capitalization and organization and things like that. And it was really a lot of fun to see what kind of paper she came up with. So that was something I did through my account, and so that we could kind of I showed them what it could do. And I do emphasize, it's like I want to hear your authentic voice, your authentic, writing. So that can be, I think, for some teachers, it can be kind of scary to even dip their toes in it like that.
Right.
But that is a way of not making them do it. But yeah, that was absolutely inspired by this, just small teaching, just doing
Oh,
little
good.
things little changes that are technology driven.
I love it so much on so many different levels. And if you don't mind, Sarah, I would love to share your example in further conversations that I'm having with folks.
Absolutely. Yes. Feel free to
But
share.
here's something that I picked up on, and quite frankly, it just sounds fun, right? Who doesn't
Mhm.
love Ariel the Mermaid? I mean, seriously, if you knew how many times I watched that movie, uh, maybe that character doesn't resonate with everybody, but I think everybody at least knows who she is, and
Yeah.
that is a key part of cultivating empathy and emotional presence, is to allow ourselves to have fun with our classes, because enjoyment is an emotion. When we're having fun, we're enjoying what we're
Mhm.
doing, and it is very evident that we are more focused, more engaged, more motivated. We learn and think more effectively, and we remember better. Your students are,
Absolutely.
they learned a lot by fixing Ariel's comma splices. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, and they seem to when as I'm looking at the reflective paper, reflective papers, I'm realizing that they feel a little bit more relaxed in their own hero's journey and kind of defining that the way that they want to define it. So it's been
Love it.
really really fun. It's fun when you find something that works, and we learned about comma splices too.
Yes. There's a book that your example makes me think of. There's a book that was written, a cookbook written by comedian Jerry Seinfeld's wife a number of years back. And it's
Okay.
called Deceptively Delicious. And every recipe has vegetables snuck into, for example, the brownies, literally,
Okay.
like zucchini and the brownies. And that's what your example makes me think of, is like, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and we're learning too, but we're taking some of the pain out of it. And demonstrating a fun and creative use of AI. And as you said, using your account so students don't have to log in. I love it. Great,
Oh,
great approach.
thank you. I'm gonna call that assignment hidden veggies.
Love it.
It's a hidden veggies assignment. Okay, wonderful. Um, all right. Well, let's talk about the future a little bit. Let's look ahead, and I know none of us can predict, but how do you see artificial intelligence, and maybe you have some more insights about just technology in general, but maybe like how is it shaping the overall social and mental health experience for students, for us, as just for everyone. What do you think will change? How do you think this will kind of like all play out? Is there something that you can see or predict?
Yeah, and you may remember that one of my slides from that talk is a crystal ball, and it says I don't have one.
Yes.
However, as I've been saying throughout our conversation, we would be foolish not to be keeping a critical eye on the future. Now, I do believe that we're in a really unique moment of time.
Mhm.
No analogy is, really effective, but I do like the approach that I heard from a lawyer, a professor of law, on a panel about sort of the moral nuances of teaching and learning with AI. And he reminded the audience that was in that session about Napster. Now, I don't know if all of your listeners might remember
Mhm.
Napster, but it was an
Ew.
innovation that upended the music industry. And there was a period of time where lawsuits abounded, where music companies were really, really struggling, and it was hard to see where, what was going to happen. It
Mm,
sort of gave rise to a very different way of streaming and selling music through Spotify, iTunes, all these different kinds of platforms that didn't really exist before Napster.
yeah,
So that analogy helps me just kind of think, well, I don't know where we're going, but there's a high degree of uncertainty and lack of regulation right now.
right.
I do believe some of that is coming. I believe that lawsuits, that governmental regulation, that industry standards, some of these guardrails are coming and we don't have them yet. But
Mhm.
here's where I think, it's easy to get existential. It's easy to get dystopian when we think about a future. What are these tools going to do? But I am convinced that that human connection, the emotional connection, the importance of positive relationships, that is the way forward, regardless of what happens with technology. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking about the Harvard studies on human flourishing, which has been happening. These studies have been ongoing for over 70 years now. And
Mhm.
our basic humanity is not going to change based on these tools. What those studies show is that in order for us to thrive and be effective at work, in our classes, in our communities, in our homes,
Mhm.
there's a key element, and that is the importance of social connections and meaningful relationships.
Mhm.
AI is not going to replace that. There's a terrifying technology called Friend, and the advertisement shows individuals out on a hike and they just tap this little thing they're wearing around their neck and the friend talks to them. And I'm like, no,
Oh,
that
no.
scares me. That scares
Yeah,
me. We need to make sure that we are helping ourselves, our kids, our families, our students, our colleagues really, again, prioritize, fiercely protect the human connections, the
yeah.
importance of relationships. That's what we're wired for. These tools can't take those things away. Now, I'll choose to go back to optimism and say one more thing. I do believe these tools are going to enhance our, dare I say, work life balance when we learn how to use them effectively to help us be more efficient with our time. One example from Jose Bowen and Eddie Watson's book, Teaching with AI, talks about how these AI tools are being used in doctor's appointments, as an
Mhm.
example. And there's a tagline of one of these companies that basically says, see the patient, not the technology. And the
Mm.
idea is the AI assistant is taking all the notes. How many times have you been in a medical appointment and the provider is like, okay, I've got to take all these notes for you,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So the tools, I think, can enhance human connections, enhance interactions. In education, we talk a lot about outsourcing some of the tedium of teaching and learning so that
Yeah.
we have more time for meaningful connection with students. That's what I'm going to choose to believe is going to be in our future.
Yeah, I mean, that makes me think. I mean, the analogy to teachers is that all of the that we can be in the classroom maybe more with students, the more we have these tools and the more maybe they have the tools. Maybe it will create more time. And of course, technology never creates more time for us, but more, the ability to be in person with them more because behind the scenes, artificial intelligence is doing the things that we used to have to, do, in our offices, and instead we can have more FaceTime and real, embodied, in-person time.
And yeah, and even again, I definitely think we need to remind ourselves that in online classes too, I think that these tools can open up more time for interaction, even if it's not embodied and in person.
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
interaction is the key. And I think these tools can, when it comes to teaching and learning, I think they can be effective equity partners. I think that they can help us be more effective and help our students feel more welcome and included. And again, I'm going to quote my favorite book on this topic, AI, Teaching with AI, Bowen and Watson. They talk about, for example, uploading a set of PowerPoint slides that you're going to use for your lecture and asking the bot to say, where have I left students out? Or Can
Mm,
you help create some examples that are relevant for students of this particular age range in this moment in time?
mm,
Create some pop culture references or identify to me some language that might help or might cause some students to feel excluded. So,
mhm,
and here's one more example. I'm teaching a large enrollment class right now. This is a new format to me. I've only ever taught smaller discussion based kinds of college classes.
mhm.
And I'm asking the bots to create 62 different scenarios for each of the groups. I have a 250 seat class. Each of the groups gets a unique scenario, and the tool can do it like that. So,
Yes.
creating learning activities that foster meaningful interaction between people and among people. I think that's where the superpowers of these tools lie when it comes to education.
I think that is so important. We have my son is a senior in high school, and we're looking at the University of Florida, Florida State University, these with all these huge freshman classes that
Hmm.
he's overwhelmed. And so I think that those larger classes, like how to solve the problem of engagement with bigger classes, is wonderful. So I look forward to more of more of those ideas coming from your corner.
Well, and of course, I would say let's get rid of those large enrollment classes. They're
Yeah.
terrible and not very humane at all for anybody involved. However, I'm very pragmatic and I don't really see higher ed changing everything overnight. So, given the systems that we work in and the challenges that we navigate that we may not have any control over, how can we use these tools to foster that connection again among students in those large enrollment classes? It doesn't have to be just instructor to student. When we are intentional to create ways for student to interact and learn from each other, that's one way to kind of humanize those spaces as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, let's wrap up here. But I have one more question for you.
Mhm.
If you could give any one piece of advice to educators who are integrating AI but want to ensure they're still supporting, social and mental well-being, going back to that kind of like mental health piece of our students, do you have one? You've given us so many, but is there anything that you want to leave us with?
To support our students' mental health and well being, I think the critical piece that we as faculty members have the opportunity to do is to be very intentional to show compassion.
Hmm. Yeah.
These tools are not, somebody's going to say, but the tool, you can program the tools for compassion. And I'm saying, no, not the same way. If you recall at the conference, I even shared a story of connecting with another attendee and relating with our struggles as parents of teenagers who are navigating some challenges. That human compassion, that's what our students need. And you referred to this earlier. Sometimes you don't want to talk to the chatbot on the travel app. You want to actually talk to a real person, right?
Right.
If we prioritize and center our willingness to show empathy, to convey compassion, even in, for example, proactively flexible attendance policies or late work policies. Um, if we build structures in our class that convey that we care about our students as people first, that's how we're going to help them navigate in these mental health challenges that we're all facing. And again, I do believe there's potential with these tools, whether it's mental health, whether it's emotional support, whether it's tutoring, right? I believe these tools can 100% level the playing field for students who are struggling with learning that human element of compassion that we cannot do without.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Flower, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you for sharing your stories and examples. And what I want to do is have listeners be able to, check out your books. A lot of the references, like you gave us so many, but definitely Jose Bowen's book. So I'm going to put those in the show notes. So
Great.
if you're listening, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to explore more, check out the show notes because we have Flowers books there, and the other authors that she referred to. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, let us know what else you want to hear about when it comes to AI and education. And join me next time. We're going to start a series of how AI is impacting the workplace and how colleges can better prepare graduates, kind of what's going on right now on those entry-level jobs and what students need to know. So until next time, thanks for tuning in to AI Goes to College. And thank you, Flower.
Thank you, Sarah.